Hi all, I have another interesting Paul Morphy game to show you from the Anderssen Morphy match of 1858. In this game, in round 3 I believe, so e4 from Paul Morphy, we have e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, and this is very popular nowadays, the Berlin defense. Now Paul Morphy plays d4 here. And perhaps best is for black to take with the e pawn. For example, e5, knight e4. This is known to be pretty safe for black, this continuation. The knight can head back to e6. But in the game we have knight takes d4, and there's a slight difference here. White has potentially dangerous pawn mobility. He takes and plays e5. Now again, black's best may be here knight d5 actually. Instead, c6 was played, and after castling, c takes. Black's pawn structure is a bit wrecked here, and white doesn't immediately play e takes f6. White plays bishop g5, which is stronger than just taking the knight. We have bishop e7, e takes, bishop takes. Now, check, and yeah, black forfeits casting rights, but it's not the end of the world necessarily here. It's pretty simplified already. White took on f6, queen takes, and tries to open up the position with tempo with c3. Now for example, if d takes, knight takes, this is dangerous for the black king, and there's a tempo gainer with knight d5 or knight e4, but very wisely, d5 was played, trying to keep things stable and solid and not give the knight fantastic play. C takes, bishop e6, yes, just reinforcing d5, and now reinforcing b5. White has a natural plan of doubling here, the rooks. Rook d8, queen b3 is a4, with the rook still on a1. This structure is subject to attack. And we have to move queen e7, which seemed actually to parry a4 here. It wasn't played if a4, b4. And this position might not be entirely terrible for black. For example here, about equal. So that seems quite clever in response to parry a4. But Paul Morphy doubles the rooks, and maybe potentially there's a threat of knight takes d5 here. But it's not necessarily a big deal. It doesn't win material. I mean, there's the d pawn underneath it. It's just potential to bear in mind. We have here black was actually more concerned with the doubled rooks on e6 and perhaps f4, f5, which might explain this next move, g5, which is not too good. G5, because actually it makes the whole f4 plan much more dangerous than it ever was. This is really a mistake. If black plays queen d6, then it should be okay for black actually, because for example, if f4, just g6 to stop f5, and the king's going to use g7 potentially. So you know, this position, if g3, g6 as well, I mean g6 is what black wants to play anyway, to get his king there to connect the rooks. So yeah, this g5 doesn't seem great. We have now queen d1, which maybe is not as accurate. Well, if you're running this through an engine, the really accurate plan here is to play for f4 actually, it seems, with knight e2, to play for f4 or knight g3 to exploit the holes a bit, with that bishop pinned as well. f5 could be handy, but Paul Morphy plays queen d1, and actually here, you know, black's still okay technically. Queen f6, rook 1 to e3. I mean, it looks a little bit dangerous, but without the f4 plan, it might actually be tenable here for a while. But black played in this position rook g8, and you can see the issue with rook g8. If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, it's actually the last move of the game here. White to play. What did he play, Paul Morphy? Okay, the very powerful forcing move, rook takes e6. It's actually creating a connection tactic, yeah, f3 to pin the queen against the king, ripping open that f file. Yeah, so if takes rook f3, pinning the queen. Unfortunate, because really in the final position here, well, in this position, king g7, king g7, and actually g5 looks a little bit like a modern treatment to stop f4. You know, you sometimes get this in the Benoni. If white, yeah, white has a bit of pressure, but it might not be entirely decisive. For example, rook g3, h4, there's g4. White has a small edge, but it's not entirely decisive here in this position. White's got a positional advantage, but it's not completely, absolutely winning. So yeah, it's a bit of a shame that Anderssen really created yeah, some weaknesses, but he could have coped with them with accurate follow-up. Yeah, but it was actually a disastrous follow-up with rook g8. Okay, allowing that nice tactic. It was a bit of a one-sided match, but let's see some other games potentially from this match in future videos. Hope you got something out of this one. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks very much.